So obviously, if you have a very basic knowledge of Harry Potter, you will know that Slytherin is a house at Hogwarts. Some people believe it to be the house for evil people. And to that I say, some of my favourite theorists are in Slytherin. Hello there, how are you doing? And those of us who have spent many a day reading and watching Harry Potter have spent multiple hours wondering things about Salazar Slytherin. Like, was he an evil wizard and did he ever use dark magic? Or does his house just have a really bad reputation for that sort of thing for other reasons? Was he the first ever Parselmouth? And is it just some strange coincidence that his name sounds like a snake? Why are there so few living descendants of Slytherin? And finally, what did he do when he left Hogwarts? And today, I'm going to answer all those questions. Except for the one about his name sounding like a snake. I don't know about that. The evidence in the books seems to suggest he was a dark wizard. Especially considering Ernie Macmillan says he's a Parselmouth. Everyone knows that's the mark of a dark wizard. Have you ever heard of a decent one who could talk to snakes? They called Slytherin himself Serpent Tongue, which implies that Salazar Slytherin was in fact a dark wizard. But you know, this is going off the word of a 12-year-old, which isn't really a reliable source. However, this prejudice against Parseltongues isn't actually uncommon, and is even shared by the ex-Minister for Magic, Cornelius Fudge, who says, "The boy can talk to snakes, Dumbledore, and you still think he's trustworthy?" Showing that Parseltongues are seen to be untrustworthy by lots of important people in the wizarding community. And all the Parseltongues mentioned in the books are descendants of Salazar Slytherin. Except Harry Potter, but you know, that's a different case. Which leads me perfectly into the next question, being, was he the first ever Parselmouth? And for a while, I thought he was, since almost every Parseltongue mentioned is a descendant of his, and he was a very powerful wizard, so maybe he was the only person who was able to learn this ability. However, according to a bit of research I've done today, in the Harry Potter video games, there was a wizard called Helpo the Fowl, who appeared on the famous Wizards cards, and he was an ancient Greek Parseltongue. He was also credited as the first person to ever hatch a basilisk and the first person to ever create a Horcrux. So, yeah, he was a pretty dark wizard. So maybe this reputation of Parseltongues being dark wizards came before Slytherin's time. However, Salazar Slytherin doesn't have a great track record, considering he literally tried to murder every Muggle born in the school with a basilisk, or at least get his descendant to do it. So I think it's relatively safe to say that Salazar Slytherin was quite an evil wizard. And there's even evidence on Pottermore showing that he encouraged the learning of dark arts. Perhaps when he first constructed the chamber, Slytherin wanted no more than a place in which to instruct his students in spells of which the other three founders may have disapproved. Disagreements sprung up early around the teaching of dark arts. This shows that Salazar Slytherin encouraged the teaching of dark arts and perhaps taught the students of the school dark arts in secret for a time. I actually think there's a large possibility Slytherin's probably a descendant from Herpo the Fowl, because they're both Parseltongues and that's something we know to be passed down genetically, but you know, that's a theory for another day. Next question. Why are there so few living descendants of Salazar Slytherin? Now, obviously, we know Salazar Slytherin did have children because Voldemort is a descendant of him. However, we know nothing about when or where he had these children, because the last thing we know about Salazar Slytherin is that he had an argument with Godric Gryffindor and left Hogwarts.
Salazar Slytherin wished to be more selective about the students admitted to Hogwarts. He believed magical learning should be kept within all magic families.
After a while, there was a serious argument on the subject between Slytherin and Gryffindor, and Slytherin left the school. We don't know what he did after that. Well, I have a theory on it, so maybe we do. All we really know is that the other three founders had enough respect for him after he left not to change the name of his house. And I find it very interesting that he didn't create another wizarding school in the United Kingdom to teach his way to compete with Hogwarts. Considering how insistent he was on his opinion being right, I realistically don't think there would be anything else he would have done other than joining another school and teaching the children of this school about pure-blood superiority. But he didn't want the three founders of Hogwarts to find out about these plans, so he fled far away, all the way to Scandinavia, to Durmstrang. He did still want to make Hogwarts a pure-blood only school, but he realised he couldn't do it while the other three founders were there, specifically Godric Gryffindor. So when he fled to Scandinavia, he left a beast in his chamber and left the job to one of his descendants, who turned out to be Tom Riddle, who was to release the beast on the Muggle-borns once the founders were gone. Meanwhile, He was at a school in northern Scandinavia, at Durmstrang, which according to Pottermore, once had the darkest reputations of all 11 wizarding schools. From what we know from the books about Durmstrang, is that it's notorious for its acceptance of the dark arts. As Draco Malfoy says, "Father says Durmstrang takes a much more sensible line than Hogwarts about the dark arts. Durmstrang students actually learn them, not just the defense rubbish we do." And as I showed earlier, there's an excerpt from Pottermore showing that Salazar Slytherin actually encouraged the teaching of the dark arts. We also know that Durmstrang does not admit muggle-borns, which is another thing that Slytherin seem to vouch for.
He believed magical learning should be kept within all magic families. In other words, purebloods.
Maybe it's all just coincidental, but don't you think it's more than a coincidence that Durmstrang is basically everything Slytherin wanted Hogwarts to be? Do you think that maybe he played a part in making Durmstrang like that? Also, if you're wondering how well the time periods fit, we don't actually get an exact date on when either of the schools were formed. However, according to Google, Hogwarts was formed in 990 AD, and despite not being given an exact date on when Durmstrang was founded, we do know it was around 700 years before the Goblet of Fire, because that is when the first Triwizard tournament took place. So I think it is relatively safe to assume that Durmstrang is an old school just like Hogwarts, and therefore the time periods fit relatively well. But for some of you, there probably still isn't enough evidence. But I've got one final piece of evidence that might just help it all piece together. So far, my theory states that he fled the UK to Scandinavia when he didn't get his way with how Hogwarts was to be run. And at around this time in Scandinavia, another wizarding school had been set up called Durmstrang by the great Bulgarian witch Narita Volchanova. I definitely pronounced that wrong, I can't pronounce any of these European names. He presumably started teaching at this school as a way to begin to influence the students and mould the school in what he wanted it to be and what it was to soon become. The interesting thing was what I found on Pottermore about what it said about the first headmaster. Harfang Munter took over the school shortly after the mysterious death of its founder, the great Bulgarian witch Narita Volchanova. Munter established Durmstrang's reputation for dueling and all forms of martial magic, which remain an impressive part of its curriculum today. Mysterious death. That's a strangely specific detail to include. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Salazar Slytherin killed Narita Volchanova. If you don't understand, let me explain. After having a disagreement with Godric Gryffindor about how Hogwarts should be run, he fled to Scandinavia to find a school called Durmstrang, only to find it too had a very similar setup to Hogwarts. And again, he tried to argue his beliefs that they should teach the dark arts and that muggle-born shouldn't be omitted. But similarly to Godric Gryffindor, Narita Volchanova wouldn't be swayed. But there was a difference this time. Her second-hand man, Harfang Munter, did believe the same thing as Salazar Slytherin. So the two of them plotted her murder and ran the school the way Slytherin believed they should run the school. Which explains what he did after Hogwarts. It proves he was an evil dark wizard, which I guess in turn explains why most of the evil wizards are put into Slytherin. And it also explains why he has so few descendants, and why Dumbledore was so shocked that Tom Riddle was a descendant of Slytherin.
I can speak to snakes too. They find me. Whisper things. Is that normal for someone like me?
Because all the descendants of Slytherin live in Scandinavia. Or they just died out. I can't really prove they live in Scandinavia. But we still don't know why his name sounds like a snake. I would literally love it if J.K. Rowling made a book or a film about the founders of Hogwarts, because Salazar Slytherin would just be such a great character to develop. And it would also be great to see the characters like Godric Gryffindor, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Helga Hufflepuff and see what they're actually like. But anyway, yeah, that's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you think we should start a campaign to make a movie about Salazar Slytherin and the other founders of Hogwarts, leave a like and subscribe. Otherwise, watch another Harry Potter video and check out my other social medias like Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. It'd be great to have you guys following me on there too. The links are in the description.